Welcome. It is Verdict with Ted Cruz, Ben Ferguson with you. It's the weekend review, and here are the big stories that you may have missed that we talked about. First up, the media lied, using a 5-year-old boy to slander ICE and Homeland Security agents. So what is the real story? Well, it's not what they told you, and we'll have it for you. Also, the nitty-gritty on the Trump accounts and how it could literally transform America into a different place for young people. This is a major opportunity for so many American families. So how can you get involved in it? We'll explain it as well. And finally, a man that was shot in Minneapolis. They memorialized him in the media as a kind, loving man who was just a do-gooder. Well, now more of the stories coming out, and that man wasn't so peaceful after all. It's the weekend review, and it starts right now.
ICE apprehends 5-year-old child. That story was everywhere. By the way, it's a total lie. It's absolutely false. In fact, what happened is ICE came to apprehend the father. The father ran off and abandoned the 5-year-old child. And understandably, ICE was not going to leave a 5-year-old child alone on the street in the middle of winter.
Freezing to death outside. Yeah, I mean, they wouldn't leave him alone, period. But the argument that the left has made, I'm like, let me get this straight. You guys want the kid to be left alone just to wander the streets of a city? And be alone? That's insane. And then in the winter when they could freeze to death, that's also insane. They actually found the woman, the mother of the child.
Yes, it is reported they found the mother of the child. They knocked on the door, tried to give the child back to her. She wouldn't take him. She closed the door and said, no, I won't take him. And so, look, the purpose of that story is not actually factual journalism. It is entirely about telling a story to pull on people's heartstrings and to cause suburban voters who are not paying close attention to say, oh, this has gone too far. If they're shooting moms and nurses and arresting little kids, clearly it's gone too far. This is a political campaign. And tragically, it's a political campaign that is costing people's lives. But because, look, the political campaign is having some real effect. It is having effect. We saw, John Kasich. Speaking of suburban women, we saw John Kasich put out a whole video saying, I'm hurting so much. We must stop arresting illegals. Unfortunately, that's the target audience. And in the world of politics, we've got to realize that we've got to confront the bad stories with stories that are compelling, and it's where tone matters. And I would encourage, look, the administration is doing a fantastic job securing the border. Illegal crossings have dropped 99%. It's phenomenal. They're doing a terrific job going and arresting violent criminals, murderers and rapists and gangbangers, which is why we've seen the murder rate drop 20%. We covered that in the last podcast, that the murder rate has dropped 20% across the country. That's a massive success. What I think the administration could do better is the tone with which they're describing this. That immediately when an incident like this happens, they come out guns blazing, that we took out a violent terrorist, hooray. And the problem is, particularly for someone not paying attention, if you're being told this is a mom of 3 and there's no indication, she's not waving an ISIS flag or doesn't have a suicide vest around her. Yeah. Escalating the rhetoric doesn't help, and it actually loses credibility. And so I would encourage the administration to be more measured, to recognize the tragedy and to say we don't want anyone's lives to be lost. And the politicians who are pouring gasoline onto this fire, they need to stop.
Yeah, I agree with you there. And I also think, look, facts matter. Explaining what happened is very important. The 5-year-old story is a perfect example. All the morning news shows, ABC, NBC, CBS, they led with that story and ran it into the ground that morning that a 5-year-old was detained by ICE, and they didn't correct that story. Not only is the Democratic Party looking for an opportunity, so is the media. And they now believe that like this civil war and hold this flag up is, and plan it is we as Democrats were willing to shut down the government to defund ICE. That's going to be the premise, is what I've been told from many in the media that I've talked to and some of my friends on the left. They're like, yeah, we're going to shut down. We're justified this time way more than we were last time. Yep. last time we really weren't justified very much in shutting down the government, but we tried it anyway. Now they actually feel emboldened. Do you think a government shutdown is going to come, yes or no?
Yes, 100% yes.
Okay,
Look,
and it's going to be tied to this issue, right?
Yes,
Okay.
100%. The last government shutdown, which was the longest government shutdown in U.S. history, Chuck Schumer and the Democrats forced through, really to show his radical base that he was fighting because he's scared of being primaried by AOC. But they also did it to tee up the issue of health care and the cost of health insurance premiums. Mind you, the premiums have skyrocketed because of Obamacare, because of their policy. But they did the shutdown. It was entirely with an eye towards November that they say, look, we fought like crazy on health insurance and the mean Republicans didn't give us what we wanted, which was $50 billion in corporate welfare subsidies to giant health insurance companies. And that's why your health insurance has gone up. Now, that's factually wrong, but it is a political narrative they're telling here. They are going to tell the narrative, we will not fund ICE under any circumstances, and we will shut the government down. And by the way, the media covered for them so much, their base was so happy with the shutdown, I think they perceive very few downsides to shutting the government down. Now, this shutdown that will happen on January 30th will likely be smaller than the previous one. And the reason is we've funded some parts.
Explain why, because does that mean they're being more strategic in how they're doing it? Or explain that. Okay.
No, between the two, we have passed some appropriations bills. So once appropriations bills are passed, those departments are funding. So ag, the Department of Agriculture is funded. And so everything that goes through ag is funded. CJS, Commerce, Justice, and Science, that is funded. Energy is funded. Water is funded. Interior, Environment, Ledge Branch, Military Construction, and the VA. All of those are funded. So the shutdown will not impact any of those. So what would a shutdown impact? It would impact Defense, the Department of War. It would impact the Department of Labor. It would impact HHS. It would impact the Department of Education. It would impact the Department of Transportation and Housing and Urban Development. It would impact the SEC, the FCC, the independent agencies, and it would impact DHS, the Department of Homeland Security, and ICE directly under that. And I think you're going to see the Democrats force a shutdown. And actually, you don't have to take my words for it. Here, let me read for you what Schumer tweeted out to the world. He said, quote, "What's happening in Minnesota is appalling and unacceptable in any American city. Democrats sought common sense reforms in the Department of Homeland Security spending bill. But because of Republicans' refusal to stand up to President Trump, the DHS bill is woefully inadequate to rein in the abuses of ICE. I will vote no. Senate Democrats will not provide the votes to proceed to the appropriations bill if the DHS funding bill is included." There he is, explicitly, unequivocally threatening a shutdown. I think that's what we're going to see come January 30th.
Well, and by the way, he's not the only one. So Elizabeth Warren was responding to another tweet. I want to read it. It was just the tweet she was responding to give it context says, "Reminder, DHS legislation that funds ICE at current levels without policy restrictions is in the Senate and needs 60 votes to pass. Deadline is next Friday." Elizabeth Warren puts that out there with this, and she says, quote, "I'm a hell no, not a penny more for ICE. We should not fund this terror." So she's also jumping on board with this as well. And then there's other senators who've come out. And so this is why I say this isn't a one-off. This is clearly a coordinated attack is the best way I can describe it.
Well, here's Chris Murphy on CNN. Give a listen.
I want to ask about what your leader, Chuck Schumer, says. The Democrats are going to vote against a government funding package that is before the Senate soon, and it includes money for the Department of Homeland Security. How is that going to play out?
Well, we can't vote to fund this lawless Department of Homeland Security.
We can't fund this lawless Department of Homeland Security. Senator, that's pretty bold words, if you ask me, by a senator that clearly is like, hey, we're all on the same page. This is what we're doing now.
Yeah, look, that's the position of every Democrat. And understand, this is the same position that is abolish ICE and abolish the police. They're saying they're going to refuse to fund the Department of Homeland Security, the department that is charged with keeping us safe, with securing our border, with protecting our families, and the Democrats are saying, we won't fund it. So what will happen? I think there's a chance we see Congress put together an appropriations package that funds everything but DHS. That might pass. Okay. In terms of DHS, I think the Democrats are going to force a shutdown, and I think they want it to be extended. And in order,
so this is not a short one. To be clear, you think they want this to be painful, almost like they're running in the midterms on this issue of ICE.
I think they want to be able to tell their base, we are defunding ICE. We are abolishing ICE. We are against law enforcement. We're with the criminals. That's their messaging.
Now, if you want to hear the rest of this conversation, you can go back and listen to the full podcast from earlier this week. Now on to story number 2. All right, Senator, I want to get back to these Trump accounts, and let's talk about the nitty-gritty of this. When you look at the dollars and the growing of wealth and how this could fundamentally change a country where every child that is in poverty could get out of poverty just by having these accounts, and talk about where they could start a small business or be able to pay for college or different things like that. It is truly empowering for an entire generation what we are now starting with these Trump's accounts. I actually think it's going to be one of the biggest parts of your legacy ever.
Yeah, look, I think the Trump accounts will be truly transformational. And I will say it's interesting. I think President Trump initially, when we laid out the idea to him, he liked it. But I think as he's seen more and more what these are going to do, I think he's really appreciating that these are going to be a huge part of his legacy. When all of us are dead and buried, people are still going to, the impact of the Trump accounts is going to echo forward. And the two massive benefits are, number one, every kid in America is going to get the benefit of compound growth. Half of the people in America don't own a single stock and don't own a single bond. And the impact, well, here, give a listen to Fox News talking about just how much wealth kids can accumulate through these Trump accounts.
You kind of touch on this. By age 18, right, you could have $303,000. By age 28, it's more than $1 million. If you do the maximum contributions, if you give no contributions, right, you're still shy of $6,000, which ain't nothing, and then $18,000 by age 28. President Bush 43 pushed this idea about 25 years.
I mean, you look at just the political willpower of getting something like this done. It shouldn't take this much, but this was a major fight center that you had to go to war with to get it to happen, and I don't understand why.
Oh, look, in the tax cut, you were competing with everything else. Everyone else had a priority, and so it was dividing the pie. And it was also, look, this was something new. It was major. Getting it through the Senate parliamentarian was a real challenge, and we fought hard and got it through. And you look at that math. You're not talking about just the kids of rich people. You're talking about the kids of a single mom who's waiting tables. And the math of that, so a little girl born this year, she gets the $1,000 automatically put in the account, and that can accumulate and grow. But where the real math is if their contributions of $5,000 a year, now those can come from a parent, those can come from a family member, or those can come from an employer. And there are two big accelerants that we wrote into the bill. Number one is the employer piece of it, that the employers think about, to give you a sense of the scope and magnitude, think back to when Congress passed Section 401k of ERISA. That was decades ago. And I suspect nobody in Congress knew just how fundamentally they were going to change how Americans save for retirement. There are right now more than $12 trillion in 401k accounts. It's massive. Yeah. And there will be, in just a couple of years, trillions of dollars in Trump accounts as well. The volume of it is massive. And one of the things that's a real accelerant is, most big employers match 401k contributions. If you're an employee, sometimes employers will contribute directly to 401ks. Other times they'll match if you make a contribution. I think we are going to see the same thing with Trump accounts, that this is going to become a standard, a ubiquitous employee benefit, that employers will say, we're going to match your contributions or contribute directly to the Trump accounts that your kids have. A bunch of big employers have already announced they're doing that. Actually, Visa had a very clever thing they announced. They said you can use your reward points, you can convert them into money and deposit them in your kids' Trump accounts. That's an accelerant to help more dollars get in. And one of the things about compound growth that you know is the earlier you invest, the bigger it grows. And that's one of the things that's really powerful is starting. If someone starts saving at age 40 or 50 or 60,
you're so far behind.
Yeah, they don't have a long enough time horizon for it to really grow into big numbers. If you start at age 0, that gives a long time for that growth to compound. That's really powerful. The second accelerant.
Go back to the number that you mentioned and that Fox had there. If you do the maximum contribution, you have a child $5,000 a year.
Yeah.
All right. Like $5,000 a year. You think about that over 12 years, that's $60,000 that you put in. But if you keep going, I'm putting that in perspective to realize like this is not a crazy amount of money if you're disciplined. You're talking about $1,091,900 by age 28. That is unbelievable.
Yeah, and look, $5,000 a year is about $100 a week. And so that can come from a parent, come from another family member. But the other accelerant that's really powerful is we wrote this so that it could accept charitable gifts. So as you know, Michael and Susan Dell are giving $6.25 billion. They're giving $250 to every child under 10 who lives in a zip code where the median income is $150,000 or less. That's is amazing. A massive contribution. Brad Gerstner, who came up with the idea for the Trump accounts and who was my partner in getting this done, and we worked hand in hand. Brad has announced he's doing the same thing for the state of Indiana.
So cool.
$250 for every kid under 5, but it's going to be about $250 million that he's giving. And same thing targeted for kids in zip codes where the median income is $150,000 or less. I think you're going to see lots of people doing charitable contributions. That is really, really powerful. And it's something President Trump is encouraging. It's something I'm encouraging every employer to do this. I'm encouraging philanthropists. And by the way, Michael Dell has said he's not done at $6.25 billion. He's talked about giving
That's
a
amazing. Lot
more money than that. One of the cool things about this is it's infinitely scalable. So Michael Dell has more than $100 billion. If you're thinking about where to give your money away in philanthropy, there are not a lot of charities that can take amounts that big. This is infinitely scalable, and so it has a potential really to accelerate the wealth creation for kids.
As before, if you want to hear the rest of this conversation on this topic, you can go back and download the podcast from earlier this week to hear the entire thing. I want to get back to the big story, number 3 of the week you may have missed. All right, Senator, I want to get into this other story that is the media and the bias of the media and the narrative they've been pushing in Minnesota specifically with this ICU nurse. They turn him into a do-gooder. We then get a video that comes out showing him attacking ICE agents days before the fatal confrontation with ICE. And that part seems to be just disappearing from the media's coverage.
Well, yeah, look, we have seen with the protests and the riots that are unfolding in Minneapolis, we have seen the corporate media just turn into shameless propagandists. And they have a narrative, and that narrative is disconnected from facts and reality. And they're trying to mislead people. And so we've seen that. We've seen that with the headlines everywhere saying ICE arrested a 5-year-old boy. And people read that and are like, okay, that's crazy. Why are you arresting a 5-year-old? Well, turns out they didn't. It's false. It was a lie. What actually happened is they were there arresting his father, who was an illegal immigrant, and the father ran away and abandoned the 5-year-old. And so the 5-year-old is left alone in the cold on the streets of Minneapolis. Of course, ICE didn't just leave the kid there to wander outside. They had to take care of him. And in fact, they tried to return him to his mother. His mother said no, wouldn't let him in the house. And so that's an example. Look, another example, the man who was shot in Minneapolis, Mr. Preddy. You're right. The media portrayed him as this peaceful protester, this ICU nurse, and just You saw Democrats saying that ICE are cold-blooded murderers, and that's a flat-out lie, and it's a slander, and it is something.
By the way, you even had one of your colleagues put up a AI picture on the floor of the Senate, for goodness sakes, that was not a real picture.
Look, it is designed to be manipulative and dishonest, and then a couple of days after the shooting, we had a video that the BBC put out that they had gotten to Mr. Preddy a couple of weeks earlier, and let's look at the video. For those who are watching this online, let's look at the video real quickly.
Yeah, and by the way, for those listening right now on the radio, we'll put this up on social media, but this shows the man spitting in the face of ICE agents, kicking the taillight out of their car, and a full-on confrontation. Take a listen and watch if you're watching online.
This is a moment the news movement filmed on January 13th in Minneapolis, showing a man who appears to be Alex Preddy interacting with federal immigration agents 11 days before Border Patrol shot and killed him. Our footage was analyzed by the BBC, whose facial recognition technology confirmed his identity to a 97% degree of accuracy.
Now, the video goes longer than that, and you can watch it online, but I think the point that so many people need to understand is they were talking about the accuracy of this video, and hey, we're almost positive it's him. Well, the family has now confirmed that this is actually him doing this, kicking out the taillight, screaming F you at the ICE agents, spitting at the ICE agents. Like, this is a man that wanted a confrontation with law enforcement. He was there for that reason that day, and in the day that unfortunately cost him his life.
Well, that's right, and this was not peaceful protest. In the video, as you said, he was spitting at ICE agents, but he also is repeatedly kicking the taillight. He kicks the taillight out of an SUV. I mean, it's a hard kick that he knocks it out, and that was clearly a violent assault. By the way, he has his gun strapped on his waistband while he is attacking law enforcement officers. And the media wanted to convey it as just, he's this peaceful soul. Listen, if you engage in acts of violence directed at law enforcement, there is a very real risk that the response to an act of violence will be the use of force and in some instances can be the use of deadly force. At any time an American is killed in an interaction with law enforcement, it is tragic.
Yes.
But the media was being deliberately deceptive in falsely portraying him as this peaceful protester, almost like a nun holding a candle by the side of the road, and that's not. He was clearly and captured on video engaged in violent attacks on law enforcement. And then in terms of propaganda, I got to say, MSNBC went even further. And rather than me tell you what happened, listen to Joe Rogan, because Joe Rogan comments on just how shamelessly MSNBC was acting as a political propagandist.
Yeah, was wanting you to root for this nurse, wanted to change who he was so that everyone would root for him. Here it is, Joe Rogan, and Joe Rogan also talking about his own experience when he was attacked by the media, and they changed the color of his skin during COVID.
Did you see what MSNBC did to his image?
Yeah, where they gussied
basically
it up.
Did the opposite of what CNN did to me. CNN during the COVID times turned me green, and they made me ugly and look like I was dying, and they made him handsome.
Yeah.
So people would be more sympathetic to him getting shot, which is kind of wild. Are ugly people less valuable to MSNBC?
Less marketable?
That is crazy to me. Look at the difference.
Yeah.
Look at the difference. They shortened up his face. They gave him a little bit of a tan. They widened his face a little bit, it seems like. They just made him a little handsomer.
Yeah,
a little hotter.
They gave him a bit of that Chad jaw, didn't they?
They shrunk his nose a little too, didn't they?
Yeah, they did.
They shrunk his nose.
Yeah.
Gave him a little bit of a handsome jaw. So he looks like an
even
American.
Made him. If you look at the shoulders, it even looks like they may have plumped up the shoulders there a bit.
A little bit. Yeah, the one on the right looks like he's a little plumper. Yeah. They changed the tone of the color. Wild. I mean, they changed his teeth, man.
Communist News Network.
Look, they gave him veneers.
Yeah.
Look at the difference in his teeth. He's a much more handsome guy. That one on the right is like the handsome brother.
I mean, Senator, you want to talk about just straight up propaganda. This dude, they literally made him jacked. They gave him muscles. They changed the color of his scrubs from the picture. They gave him veneers. They even made his beard look a little bit darker and more full. Changed his nose. It was like you went to AI and you said, hey, make this guy the most attractive you can, and then we're going to put that up on TV so that somehow people will be rooting for him a little bit more. It's truly amazing that MSNBC did this, and they haven't actually technically apologized for it yet. They've put a statement out there, but that's about it.
Yeah, understand, there is zero dispute that MSNBC did this. In fact, MSNBC put out a statement. They said, editor's note, MS Now swapped out the original thumbnail image for this video. The previous thumbnail image was an AI-enhanced image of Alex Preddy. So they've acknowledged they used AI to significantly change his appearance and to make him markedly better looking. And look, I looked online. As far as I can tell, MSNBC has not apologized. Nobody has been fired. If they are, in fact, a news organization, they pretend they are.
You'd fire somebody immediately.
Their job is to report the news and report facts. Not only were they not reporting facts, they were lying to their viewers. They were creating a fabricated and false image to change the facts to fit their political narrative. And any journalistic outfit with any integrity would fire whoever was responsible, would go on air and apologize and say, we violated our integrity. The fact that MSNBC doesn't think they need to shows just how much the corporate media, they are political liars. They are not even attempting or pretending to be journalists.
As always, thank you for listening to Verdict with Senator Ted Cruz. Ben Ferguson with you. Don't forget to download my podcast, and you can listen to my podcast every other day you're not listening to Verdict, or each day when you listen to Verdict afterwards. I'd love to have you as a listener to, again, the Ben Ferguson podcast, and we will see you back here on Monday morning.